All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is the final CAST webinar on FIFRA and ESA, number 6 in the series. It's entitled State Regulatory Agencies as Conduit for Informing Local Conditions in Federal Pesticide Processes. I'm Chris Boomsma, CEO here at the Council for Agricultural Science and Technology, and it is my privilege to kick off today's webinar, introducing you a little bit to CAST. Some of you have been part of our webinar series and may have heard these details. Others amongst you might be new. So we just want to make a few comments before handing it off for the presentation. So first of all, CAST is a 501c3 membership-supported nonprofit organization formed in 1972 as a result of a 1970 National Academy of Sciences report. Nonpartisan, apolitical, science-based, unbiased. We proudly stand behind those very principles. Our membership is composed of multiple organizations and individuals, and you can see the diversity of membership there, from scientific societies to libraries to corporations. We span a variety of organizations. And in 2022, we were happy to celebrate our 50th anniversary. Our mission at CAST is to convene and coordinate networks of experts to assemble, interpret, and communicate credible, unbiased, science-based information to policymakers, the media, the private sector, and the public. How do we go about this mission? Well, primarily through the help of many, many volunteer contributors. You'll meet some of those volunteers today during the presentation. We have a variety of board members. We have active task force members working on a variety of CAST reports, many reviewers, and then many others contributing to our organization. Many come from academia, but also government, companies, and nonprofits. So that is the Council for Agricultural Science and Technology. Just a slight bit more about us and our upcoming activities at the end of this presentation. But now at this time, I want to introduce you to Stanley Culpepper, who's going to come on and be today's moderator. Stanley's from the University of Georgia. Welcome, Stanley. We're happy you're here serving as moderator, and I'll hand it off to you now. Thanks a lot, Stanley.
Thank you so much. And again, it's my pleasure to be here. I am a weed scientist at the University of Georgia, and it's been a pleasure to work with CAST. And also, I definitely want to highlight Tony and Bernlin. They have actually been great leaders in bringing this webinar series to you. And again, as you just saw Chris was absolutely phenomenal to work with. As I want to mention Megan Wickham, she's kept us going. So we've had a great team of people that have been wonderful to work with. And it's truly my pleasure to get us going today and to serve as your moderator. I do want to mention, even before I get going, please put your questions in the Q&A box throughout, and we will do our best to address all of those as we get through the presentation. Okay, so not to delay any further, fantastic paper that will be shared after this event. You have two authors. One is Ashley Frank, the other is Gary Barr. I want to give you just a little bit of an introduction on both of those before I turn it over to Gary. Ashley is a principal consultant specializing in pesticides and the Endangered Species Act compliance at Compliance Services International, or better known, of course, as CSI, and is a technical consultant to the FIFRA Endangered Species Task Force. Her work over the past 20 years has focused on pesticide and endangered species complexities, providing technical and strategic support for balancing food production needs with species protection goals. The other author or co-author and our presenter today is Gary Barr from Washington State Department of Agriculture. Gary began working as the science liaison in the director's office in April of 2021 after leading the agency's natural resource science team. Gary has worked in state pesticide programs for over 30 years related to enforcement, water quality, endangered species protection, quality assurance, education, grant management, and pesticide program policy work. Gary has been quite busy. Gary has served as the chair of the state FIFRA Issues Research and Evaluation Group for the last 4 years. Gary, we look forward to your presentation, man. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Stanley, for the introduction today. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank Author Ashley Frank, who was also introduced, and certainly thanks to the chairs of this session, reviewers, and then certainly CAST. It's a great opportunity to be on a series and to be here at number 6 in the last series. Today about our state regulatory agencies as a conduit for informing local conditions related to ESA. So I'll talk a little bit about understanding the role of state lead agencies as co-regulators, a little bit about our cooperative agreement process, between EPA and state lead agencies. And then I'll try to provide a few examples of ESA mitigation, education, and regulatory options, and then suggestions about moving forward related to FIFRA and ESA. Next slide, please. Thank you. So state pesticide regulatory agencies basically were located in each state in the territories. We're the pesticide regulatory agencies that are known as state lead SLAs. We're co-regulators with EPA to ensure successful enforcement of pesticide labels and applications. FIFRA was amended to provide states with primacy or co-regulatory authority with EPA for the implementation and use and enforcement. And that was in 1978. So kind of in a nutshell, we registrations, we conduct our rules and regulations, government pesticide use. We conduct certification and training programs for applicators. We also work to post requirements prior to applications. We work with responding to complaints concerning misapplications. We do a variety of use inspections and reportings, investigations, et cetera, to enforce those labels at state level, state or also that 1978 amendment established the FIFRA Issues Research and Evaluation Group, or FIFRA, or excuse me, SFIREG, and that's a working committee of the Association of American Control Officials, or APCO. And yeah, I've been the chair for years. Next slide. This is just a slide showing or providing an example of all the different state lead agencies from states and territories. A lot of the Department of Agriculture's, but some are located in other agencies that have a combination of groups and authorities, such as an York is the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. California is the California Department of Regulation. So there's a list here, and also you can find these at our APCO website. Next slide, please. Okay, thanks. So basically, state lead agencies, we work under various EPA FIFRA type guidances to implement our work. So state lead agencies and tribes work with EPA under 3 primary guidances. The Office of Programs has the overall guidance that we work under to have FIFRA cooperative agreements, and this guidance essentially a several year guidance. We're still under the 2022 to 2025 guidance. These links hopefully are, if you look slideshow later and get a copy of it, these links are live. It'll take you to the EPA websites. Also, we work under that comes out of the Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention, and then there's a Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assistance guidance from. Next slide. Essentially, these together formulate the process, and cooperative agreement guidance is an important one that all SLAs work under to implement their EPA pesticide programs. The required programs are related to C&T, Worker Protection Standard, Worker and Applicator Safety, and Quality. There are optional pick list programs within the guidance. ESA is one of those, along with pollinator protection and a variety of other topics. And those are optional, not required by each state or territory. So the work essentially is in that optional format currently. Next slide. The OCSPP guidance is overall guidance nationally to not only states, tribes, and territories, but the regional EPA offices that are involved with working with state lead agencies or tribes. And it outlines their responsibilities also to implement and negotiate state managed and tribal cooperative agreements related to all kinds of different areas of jurisdiction under OC, including pesticides. Next slide. This overall national program guidance is also being looked at currently to be potentially revised. These are the required topics that each EPA region and the SLAs on within this guidance: certification and training, worker protection standard, its management, pollinator protection and plans, and any regional specific projects that states or tribes may have an interest in working on. But when this guidance gets revised, the amount of work that can be done be outlined in a guidance such as this. So any new priorities such as endangered species would have to be added. Potentially other elements would have to. So basically, foundational of the guidance would be amended, but the money also would essentially stay the same. Next slide. That would be the money that would go out to the state lead agencies to do the work, as well as the regional offices to do the work. Overall, under these umbrella guidances, the state lead agencies, we work to maintain our overall pesticide programs. As I mentioned before, these are the key elements currently working on under our FIFRA cooperative agreement guidance. And of course, water quality is one of those. And again, as I mentioned, ESA is optional. So it's our responsibility to provide the overall outreach, communication, and training as appropriate for any new and emerging issues and regulations. And certainly ESA, as things are unfolding currently at EPA, we have a responsibility to work to try and amend these guidances the best we can gradually or change our implementation strategies. Next slide. So a little bit of some of each of the categories, in case those of you on the webinar are not necessarily familiar with SLAs, but a foundation, of course, is enforcement and inspection processes. So under FIFRA, states do have those broad to regulate pesticides in a variety of ways, but we have authorities to inspect pesticide storage and distribution. We can issue stop sales and work to restrict or regulate the products. We can also, through our enforcement processes, after inspections and case reviews, we can assess civil or criminal for violations of FIFRA. And also we work related to regulating end users, distributors, and dealers of pesticides. And registrations are suspended or canceled. Just an example, I suppose, would be chlorpyrifos and the potential changes there. But we do conduct inspection and enforcement activities, and we work with our regional offices. And of course, this is a listing here at the bottom related to some of the significant things that as we conduct our work, we do need to keep in mind that we're also required to report significant items of high interest to EPA, the regional office project, such as significant water quality or endangered species incidents. Next slide. Certificate training certainly is a foundation of what we do at state lead agencies. We're responsible for establishing those C&T programs, providing the initial licensing and continued recertification of applicators, and including in the restricted use and commercial applicators, dealers, aerial applicator categories, and a variety of other categories. 2006 significant rule making related to the C&T plans, and all CNT plans needed to be revised and were and approved by EPA headquarters in November of 2023. Slide. From Megan, thank you. My video and audio keeps stuttering a bit. Okay, I'll turn off my camera. Thank you. Hopefully that helps. So CNT plans were revised and all of them were approved by EPA headquarters in November of 2023. So we're in process right now to work with EPA headquarters and the regional offices to start implementing those CNT changes. A lot of the changes certainly related to ESA going forward could be related to training manuals, competency standards, and also testing components. So this will be a whole new area underneath CNT, and those elements were not back in 2017. So these CNT plans would need to be amended. Go. Next slide. Hopefully camera helped with the audio and you can hear me fine. As I mentioned, the ESPP under our cooperative agreement is a pick list item. So some states have chosen this item and Washington State is one of those. That agreement outlines the requirements even to work to affect pesticide use related to listed species, and while at the same time not placing undue burden on agriculture and users. Under this guideline in the pick list option is that states can provide outreach and education, say protection program activities, and do education with pesticide use and the overall team that may be working with pesticide applicators and farmers. Also, there is a requirement to maintain relationships with local and regional fish and wildlife agencies, and that would include not only our state, but also U.S. Service and NOAA Fisheries as an example. And then work with our pesticide safety educators and work to train staff with the PSEPs, as they're called, in cooperative extension, to assist us in providing endangered species information to pesticide. Next slide. And so basically EPA asks states this optional pick list item to follow the stakeholder engagement processes have been provided in regulations.gov and to work with stakeholders on providing information about ESA, crop data, crop mapping, pesticide usage, where usage with listed species, pesticide use limitation habitats, and then also work to evaluate any ongoing ESA program or even proposals that are listed by EPA nationally, as species are listed and mitigation measures might get created programs. And when a state picks this they can get further engaged and work with OPP and their regional offices, and review any draft bulletins that are in Bulletins Live 2 as they may relate to our state as things get loaded into BLT. And as an example, last year in Washington State, we just had BLT or PULA areas loaded into BLT in 2023. Next slide. So compliance, certainly as I mentioned in the grant agreement, we work to register pesticides. We regulate the sale and distribution of pesticides, and certainly relative to any ESA overlap. So we have an essential role in helping EPA to implement these pesticides and include activities related to ESA. Next slide. A lot of this work sometimes is in that arena of education and compliance assistance, and certainly relation and training. Currently, there are some states that do some specific or additional, more specific ESA-related training. California and Washington State are two of them that will put together training materials, fact sheets, often related to specific PULAs or species. And here's an example that was provided in the paper, all the California DPR identification card of species that applicators should be paying closer attention to, especially if they're in B. We also work with our American Association of Pesticide Safety Educators, or APSE, and our Pesticide Education Program staff, or PSEP staff, on any training manuals and competency standards. Next slide. Thank you. Enforcement and inspection, and again, this is outlined in our paper, and key elements that our staff may get involved with, especially when things go to BLT, and also endangered species advisories and protection requirements are listed on a label. There's examples like the Enlist products, etc., or dicamba products. Next slide. So once these are listed on the label and they go into BLT, definitely our staff looking at the use limitation aspects. Are there buffer distances? Are there setbacks? Wind directional spray buffer requirements? Any kind of best, etc. Next slide. So all that's either in BLT or in the label, or a combination of the two. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of the state and local conservation strategies that have a crossover and a complementary support aspect to the ESA FIFRA elements. So basically, our state lead agencies work within our state or federal group to work to implement Clean Water Act non-point source plans. We work with conservation and university partners in implementing ag BMP strategies. All states do this around the nation. We also, of course, work within our state agencies, work with our legislature, our department processes to work through any kind of ESA work where it relates to pesticide regulation, non-point source pollution, and ESA recovery. Every state has something that's equivalent to a soil conservation commission type agency, of course, conservation districts, watershed groups, projects that are getting ground for, say, Clean Water Act programs, soil erosion protection, etc. So a lot of us already been working with NRCS, our NRCS State Technical Advisory Committee, or what's called a STAC, as well as other groups within our state. Next slide. All these elements could be built into a agreement process where states can provide a framework of how work done within our states and also around the nation. We're working with these partners. SLAs are usually in C, we have an ability to be a part of in our state to get this work done. Next slide. A few examples around the nation. and I won't go into all the details about every single one, but we often look around the nation at what are successful programs that are already getting implemented to water quality protection, ecosystem protection, and ESA, et cetera. Certainly the Chesapeake Bay program is one of those. It's been a national and international leader for 20 plus years. Those 7 states and all the associated state and agencies that are working to get agricultural runoff and general controlled and abated, and to hopefully improve the Chesapeake Bay system, especially related to nutrients, sediment, bacteria, things like that. So we're often looking at those as an example, and also researchers from universities or US are very busy and active in conducting best management practice evaluations. And recently they've been shifting a little bit also to working on pesticide topics and research. Also, I'll say our SFIREG Joint Working Committee meeting will have their April meeting in Annapolis, Maryland in mid-April 15th through the 17th. And we're hosted by the Maryland Department of Ag, EPA Region 3, University of Maryland. We'll be taking tours around the Chesapeake area in Maryland to learn about these practices in that area. Next slide. Moving farther west, Minnesota's got a fantastic program through the and a cooperative program with other agencies. They have a point source management plan. They have a water quality pesticide management plan already that's it's been in existence for many years. They have agricultural best management practices manual. It was revised in 2017. It outlines the strategies for pesticide BMPs as well as other nutrient and sediment. So they have a comprehensive pesticide water quality approach, and really essentially every state has similar programs and plans. Next slide. Michigan has a unique program called the Michigan Agriculture Environmental Assurance Program through their Michigan Department of Ag. Very successful since 1998. It's a voluntary program, comprehensive conservation planning, including pesticide elements for property to protect streams, rivers, and groundwater. Next slide. Farther west, the Oregon Pesticides has been around for 20 plus years. It's a combined Department of Ag, Oregon DQ, other agencies, including researchers that they're putting together this voluntary program in a watershed-based scenario. They have 9 pesticide stewardship project areas in the state. They're utilizing local expertise and getting mitigation at the local level. And they also have extensive monitoring to evaluate success. Next slide. Now, a little bit about the home front, Washington State. Or program examples. There are multiple programs. There are many more that are listed on this slide, but related specifically to agriculture, ag focus. We have a stewardship program led by our Conservation Commission. Department of Ag is very involved with that. Plans are written to protect watersheds and salmon and whole state. They're county-based or watershed-based plans. We also have a terrific Washington State initiated ESA planning process that started way back in the 2000s after the initial lawsuits. Many reports and strategy documents were written, and those currently are still appropriate and valid today. We have a terrific new pesticide program led by our natural resource team, teaming with conservation districts and other watershed groups to protect salmon and implement BMPs at the local level. And it's similar to the Oregon program also. Then our state Department of Ecology is the leader in creating our voluntary clean water guidance and our manuals related to our ag BMPs. We're also very active in our NRCS State Technical Advisory Committee, working with our state office at NRCS to the conservation, state conservationist on practice appropriate for agriculture. Next slide. My home state of Iowa has a terrific approach from their Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship for their nitrogen reduction strategy. They have a tremendous amount of funding and projects go out on the ground with agriculture to protect surface water, especially from nutrients and sediment. And that's another incredible example. I was involved with planting that riparian system when I was in grad school at Iowa State in the lower right-hand picture when it was first started. Next slide. So essentially, we offer NRCS conservation practice standards and the supporting documents of implementing ESA and pesticide mitigation strategies with our state technical advisory committee. And there are go through to review all the practice standards and their applicability to any kind of conservation planning needs. And that this every state around the nation, and Department of Ags can participate. You also have pesticide companies and registrants that participate, groups, NGOs like the Nature Conservancy or Pheasants Forever, or whole groups that participate in the state NRCS stack. One of the key to standards that we like to see used when we're dealing with pesticide management, integrated pest management, is 595 Management Conservation System Standard. Won't go into detail to look at it because it does provide a framework to work with landowners and applicants on an overall pesticide management approach on farm, and IPM strategies, etc. Of course, there are many other commonly associated practices that can be implemented also. Many of those we're seeing now through the ESA mitigation strategies that the EPA is proposing. Next slide. So here's a list. I won't go into them all, but a variety of all these, and they can be appropriate and applicable to this current ESA pesticides mitigation program. Next slide. So there's just 3 slides, I think, here, listing them out order with their practice standard. Hopefully you'll have an opportunity to look at this list later. These are all applicable to pesticide management. And then also the Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP, that's implemented ESA. They have their whole list of practices too. Next slide. So that was just kind of an overview of some of the mitigation strategies that could be utilized, and we like to definitely promote the fact that they should be science, and therefore we really definitely like the opportunity for the use of those NRCS practice standards. So our overall going forward to implement and educate on FIFRA and ESA the EPA pilot species strategy came out this last year, listing 27 species. This certainly is an opportunity for state lead agencies involved at their state and local regional level to work on every species has a recovery plan with actions and potential mitigation. Next slide. Also, I listed or had a couple of pictures there of these. This is a slide here site use limitation areas and ranges of the Fender's blue butterfly in Western Oregon. State lead agencies certainly could get involved in learning about the proposed PULAs, the species ranges, where the habitat is, and also we all need to be aware of, if these PULAs are being refined, what the outcome of that will be, and associated with these recovery plans and any BLT mitigations. Oh, thanks. Summary, in terms of, I've got a few slides that kind of summarize the paper elements and the slideshow today. So basically, we're looking at this opportunity right now. All three of these major strategies and cooperative agreement grant guidances are all due to be revised at the EPA headquarters level. So SFIREG, APCO, a variety of these groups are engaged with working with the EPA on how ESA be implemented into these guidances. Therefore, hopefully providing a better and clearer picture as to our state agencies going forward and how SLAs should be implementing these programmatic activities. Working to combine FIFRA, clean point source planning, development of any BMP manuals, and any kind of BMP processes to implement mitigations, and also these interim ecological or IEMs. Some groups are working with already, trying to formulate ideas and perspectives on commodity-specific mitigation systems, and especially with minor crops. And I know a variety of groups supplied a lot of comment to EPA in the last strategies, especially the herbicide strategy, including the Minor Crop Farmer Alliance, on what kind of program around or exist in the nation to implement commodity-specific mitigations. We'll need to update our C&D and our develop new training manuals and study guides and tests. And also there's this aspect of how do we develop a conservation program exemption, where IEM implementation could take place at the local level associated with a PULA, and utilize traditional NRCS and conservation district practices. Next slide. A lot of these elements are still yet to be developed. And again, kind of some of the same themes here. I think one of the key items on this slide is to develop these conservation systems, work with landowners and applicators, especially on how are we going to require reporting and verification of these systems and mitigations that are going to be required through BLT and going to get implemented. How are state agencies going to work to develop compliance with regulatory programs and also monitoring and assessment? Next slide. So again, we'll continue to focus on many of these elements. I know a lot of states are already working. How do they change their C&T plan? How do they implement overall education and outreach to make this successful? Collaboration will need to take place between state lead agencies, US EPA, and a variety of partners to facilitate this training and outreach and to clarify expectations by the state lead agencies. I think we're in a unique position to provide key information on the federal pesticide processes, but also we're unique as the local entity in each state to equip end users with ESA related information. Would appreciate the opportunity to have phase-in periods, not only for our SLAs, but for agriculture in general. But as I mentioned, the cooperative grant agreements and the guidances have yet to be rewritten and developed. But I think that's my last summary slide. Oh yes, and that's at the end there with so thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you, Stanley. Thank you to Cast. Sure appreciate it. Back to you, Stanley.
Thank you so much, Gary. So for those of you that maybe joined us a minute or two late, please, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. We do have a couple, Gary, so I'm gonna go ahead and start rolling. We've got about 15 minutes to answer questions. So again, anyone that has any thoughts or any questions for Gary or Ashley or the rest of the team, we'll be glad to try to help you. So the first one, Gary, I'm gonna read off to you. What needs to happen to have existing conservation programs like the ones you mentioned, for example, state and USDA programs, incorporated into endangered species risk assessments for pesticides?
Well, what a great question. Thanks for
Gary,
whoever supplied that.
Gary, before you answer it, see if you can cut your camera back on. I'll let you know if you're bumping in or out.
Oh,
But,
okay.
cut that back on so that everybody
See
can
if it
see.
can come
We'll
up.
see if it works. Yeah.
Yeah, it says, let's see, I can't start it because the host has stopped
Megan
it.
might have to try
Possibly
that.
Megan can,
Yeah. All right, go ahead with
change
that.
that.
She'll work on it. Yep.
Okay, yeah, see if this works. And again,
There you go. I got you. Yep, I got you.
For yeah, if I was breaking up a little bit there during my talk. Yeah, so that's a great question. One of the key things that we're trying to look for are mitigations. Our NRCS practice standards have been utilized, and available research, and certainly that has been published in peer-reviewed journals. And can that data on the efficacy of those practices and their effectiveness, is there enough information that's already to where at a localized level, where examples of hopefully success and that information can be provided to OPP and utilized in reevaluation processes and risk assessments. So we realize that there are the mitigations and the IEMs proposed for getting out the door and getting out there on the ground, but we also need to have these systems to evaluate their success. And so that's one thing that through been trying to do, is to look around the nation as to who has research. So obviously we would look to people like you, Stanley, and others, and groups such as the Weed Science Society of America, but other researchers, say at USDA, ARS, what sort of information do they have? But also, what sort of plans do they have going forward to start research? So at the Chesapeake Bay project, there are some researchers at Penn State and some of the other land grant schools that have already kind of been switching a little bit from nutrient evaluations to now pesticides also. So yeah, there's a lot to be done. So great question.
Okay, great. Let me ask you the next one. What options do state lead agencies have to develop tailored approaches for ESA mitigation implementation? That's a good question too.
Yeah, it is. Again, the cooperative grant agreements hopefully can be revised to where there can be that can be developed to where SLAs can get a little more involved with that officially. And certainly we have the opportunity to team with our land grant researchers and our commodity groups and teams of people that are very focused on looking at crops and cropping systems and rotations, and certainly specialty crops to work with the commodity groups to really develop these on what works best for them. And I know in the herbicide, there are those examples in the appendix of crop specific mitigations, and could those cotton or soybeans, et cetera, meet the points and the mitigations that were listed. And in Washington State, we have, as an example, our 300 unique crops, but we have very unique cropping systems, and we definitely are seeing the need to have that level at the cropping system level to come up with mitigations that truly are specific for our state.
And the next question, Megan,
Oh,
may actually be for you.
Maybe Ashley had a comment.
Oh, go ahead, Ashley. Sorry.
Yes, that's all right, Stanley. I just wanted to add something onto what Gary
Sure,
was just saying.
absolutely.
Kind of from the species side, it seems one of the challenges is, Gary mentioned recovery plans, and while every species is supposed to have a recovery plan, not every species does. So sometimes that makes it very difficult when thinking about at that state level and, local levels, what are the species needs? So that adds another challenge to consultation, adds another challenge to implementation, as well as mitigations when it comes to pesticides, because sometimes those species needs aren't always fleshed out and aren't always understood. So that's kind of another challenge that's facing getting the state information to go both ways.
Thank you, Ashley. That's why is my co-author. She's, yeah, thank you. Very thorough.
Yeah, very talented. Yeah, please leave your camera on so we can see you. So the next question might be for Megan. You mentioned a paper is coming out, and it's a fantastic paper, by the way. When will that be? Megan, will that be available right after we conclude today? Or Chris, Megan or Chris or Tony?
Sorry, yes, the paper should be available on our website right now. I'm just double checking to make sure it is there. If it is not on our website currently yet, but it will be up there very shortly after this webinar. So check later today, or if you want to see it right now, go ahead and email CAST and we will get you a copy of that.
Thank you so much, Megan. It really, really is a good paper. All right, so Gary, my next question. Thank you for all your work in this area. In your opinion, how can academia, especially extension services, collaborate with or assist SLAs to advance efforts regarding ESA?
Yeah, I think certainly initially we have a lot of work to do going forward to inform landowners, farmers, applicators on the ESA strategies and BLT, how to use BLT, and then the mitigation packages. So there's a lot of, certainly we're hearing a lot of growers, a lot of landowners that are just now learning about this, and as they enter the growing season this year, busy, doing their work, and we've got to really work together very well to get the education out there. And I know here in Washington and Oregon, in working with Oregon State University and also Compliance Services International with Annie Kruger and Ashley Frank, a small Western IPM grant, we're starting in on some workshops this spring. And so it's just really important to really team up with your land grant institutions and your pesticide safety educators and really work together to get the word out.
Ashley, I know you're in the middle of that. You got anything additional? Any thoughts on that?
No, we're in the middle of scheduling some different workshops in reference to what Gary was mentioning in some of these kind of localized efforts. We have some workshops that we're in the planning stages of, getting folks together all in the same room to kind of talk through some of these challenges, talk through some potential solutions. The first workshop is actually next week. So, looking at when you are in unique areas that have a lot of different specialty crops, because, agriculture is different all across the country. So looking at things in kind of a very localized area brings folks together to try to figure out what's going to work in this space and how can we make ESA comply with ESA and make things that are implementable and workable for both implementation and the enforcement piece from the state aspect.
You got it.
Yeah,
All right,
thanks for that.
Yep. The next question. To accomplish the goals you outlined for SLAs, it seems like additional monetary resources will be critical for implementing ESA strategies, which seems to be quite accurate. Would increases in state and tribal assistance grants help SLAs in implementation?
Yes, the increase in grants and grant funding would definitely assist. There's no doubt about it. Cooperative grant agreement, that's the annual agreement. And so every state differs a little bit as to how much that is, but receive a pretty substantial amount of money to implement the core elements of the program that I outlined during the talk and in the paper. To add the ESA component required currently, that would be a substantial new addition. In fact, when we look back at when worker protection standard was added to the cooperative agreement, or the water quality program was added, those were important program additions by EPA, and states agreed to add and conduct the work. Yeah, money was provided and given. However, looking at this ESA regulatory strategy, this is far more impactive. And so how much funding will it take? We're not really sure. And so it's really kind of an unknown right now. Certainly we're viewing it as more substantial than some of those other that were added previously. And those date back, 15, 20 plus years ago. And then now we have more NT rules and plans and increase there either. So it's incumbent upon each state regulatory entity to also look at what kind of money do they have available within their state, or through additional other grants, as well as teaming with other groups to seek other. So but yeah, can the core money from EPA increase? I don't know. It's not looking likely right now.
Right,
That's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, so our next question actually came up this morning for me while we were doing a training with the Georgia Department of Ag. So this is a good question from our audience. How will SLAs validate mitigation practices?
Yeah, it's uncertain right now. I mean, there are a lot of different ideas about conducting compliance assistance, conduct inspections on a certain percentage of farms areas. There are ideas about having some handheld electronic to keep track of mitigations that are getting added. Did the grower applicator look at BLT? Did the BLT requirement within 6 months of their application? There are a lot of ideas, but we're not sure yet. We're going to be able to keep track of this.
Yeah,
it's a big task. You're looking at millions of acres of farms, depending on the state, 20,000+ farmer states, thousands and thousands of certified applicators in every state. Yeah, it's a big task.
Yeah, so that one's going to be, really interesting, because people like myself and many on the call are trying to increase the flexibility as much as possible on that label. And it seems like the more flexible we get the label, maybe it's the more challenging it is for you to confirm and our growers to document it, right? So if irrigation gives us credit points and we irrigate 3 months before an inspector arrives, what's going to be required to prove that? So it's such a dynamic scenario, right?
Yeah.
So our next question, and again, if you have a question, we got about 2 or 3. We got time for one more question if somebody kicks something else in there. The one question we do have is, will the webinar recording be available? I think I can answer that one, and they'll correct me if I'm wrong. But yes, it will be available at the CAST website this afternoon, and also the paper is now up. So again, I would encourage you. It's a really, really good paper. I'm not kidding. So take the opportunity to go get that. We got about 2 minutes left out. If Tony, anything on your end, man, before I turn it back over to Chris?
No, I don't think anything to add on mine. Appreciate Gary's presentation and Ashley.
Yeah, so I'll kind of close out before I pass it back over to Chris. Again, Tony Bird, absolutely phenomenal. Bernley McGahee, absolutely phenomenal. They kind of led our side of it. Chris and Megan with CAST have absolutely been a joy to work with. Originally we were thinking maybe one paper, and this turned into something I think was pretty cool. And again, we can't thank CAST enough for working with us and putting up with us. And Chris, I'll turn it back over to you, man.
Thank you, Stanley. Certainly appreciate you, Stanley, Tony, Gary, Ashley, Bernalyn. The list goes on. As always, folks, with CAST, if we don't have these volunteer experts coming in and working with us, well, we don't have material to put out. So we certainly thank everyone that contributed a series of 6 essays, 6 webinars, in fact, 2. So a little bit before we depart. First, we did have a paper that we launched in January entitled RNA Interference in Agriculture. If you're interested in that topic, look at that QR code on your screen at this time, give it a scan. It'll take you to that paper. Check out that one. Upcoming papers. Well, we're going to be talking about preventing the next plant invasion, opportunities and challenges. That was addressed on March 14, but we're still doing some work around that, particularly around video. And you're going to see some more resources coming out from us around invasive plants. So be on the lookout for those. March 20, we have an in-person rollout on gene-edited crops. If you're interested in that topic, we'll be in St. Louis, Missouri at the Danforth Plant Science Center. More details to come on that as well. April 17, the full release of all 6 papers in this FIFRA-ESA series. So that's going to be an in-person rollout. Washington, D.C., more specifically Arlington, Virginia. You're going to be looking at the CLA and RISE conference. Take a look on you can just do a Google search for that. You should be able to find it very easily, but more details coming. That will be the essentially grand finale of all this effort. So look for us there. We hope you can attend. May 15, we'll be talking about soil health and hydrologic cycle in Ames, Iowa, near our headquarters. Upcoming webinars. You'll see a webinar related to that genome-edited crop paper coming out on April 3. So that's some of the highlights. There'll be more stuff coming from CAST throughout the year. But again, if this essay today was of interest to you, please do attend, if you can, that in-person rollout in DC on April 17. I just want to conclude now by saying if you're interested in becoming a member of CAST, scan that QR code on the screen at this time. We certainly have a variety of memberships that appeal to an individual based on their current professional status, whether you are a young professional, a student, or something else. We welcome you into the CAST organization. It's really critical, I would say, though, if you can, follow us. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, your favorite social media platform, because that way you'll learn when our webinars come out, our video interviews, and any other resources we're releasing associated with our educational productions. Please do follow us on social media. Be a big help to you if you're interested in all of this that's coming your way. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thanks again for our presenters. To them, I give them utter gratitude. Same with Tony, Stanley, Bernalyn, the folks who really brought this series together. Thanks. With that, have a great day, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.